temple priest, the high priest, and how are the Romans and the Jewish leadership institutions getting along during a century of foreign occupation? Not good, Roger. They are not getting along well. They coexist, and they actually have deals that they make with each other. Jesus' death was one of those deals. But they don't like each other. They're not getting along well at all. And that's a big feature of what's going on in the Gospels as you read through the Gospels. So there's some hostility. There's a division there. And in Paul's mind, Jesus ends up drawing onto himself this hostility between Israel and its imperial occupiers, Babylon, Rome. Like Jesus draws into himself even that dividing hostility. You with me? This is where Paul's mind goes within the big story of the Bible. This is Paul's logic here. So, how do we make a go at this? I mean, how do we wrap our minds around this and understand this? Well, here's one view you may have come across that I think can account for a lot of what's happening here. When Paul talks about a barrier dividing Jew and Gentile, he's using temple language far and near. Let me get my deal pulled up here again. Cut out on me. All right, there we go. So this is an image of the temple, like just a reconstruction image, and it's got some notes on there to kind of show you where things are. And there was at this point like the larger courts on the outside. Can you see those there? I can only see this little screen, so I don't know how well it is behind me. But there's these larger courts on the outside, and these courts would have been where, Jews and Gentiles hung out together, right? This was where Jesus stormed the temple, flipped tables, all that cool stuff, that story. And these are the outer courts, and Jews and non-Jews can exist in these courts. Roman soldiers even hung out in these outer courts. Now, Jews who are coming to worship in the temple, to participate in the liturgy, to offer sacrifices, they pass through this little fence. You see the arrow down at your left, I guess, my right? It's called a balustrade. So you go through this balustrade, and then you can ascend into the inner court, and male and female Israelites can come in there. All right, you got to be an Israelite. You got to be a Jew. For those who are offering sacrifices, the males can then ascend the steps. They can meet the priest at the doorway. You see that first little doorway in front of the big veil, in front of the big door? They can meet the priest there, and then their animal will get escorted up and be slaughtered at the altar. So anyways, what I want you to see, there where the balustrade is, there were stone inscriptions and warning signs and stop signs, basically. Ancient no trespassing signs is what they are. And here's one that they actually uncovered. There's a picture of one. And it was preserved in the rubble, and it's been excavated, and basically, this is what it says. No stranger, that is foreigner, no non-Israelite, is to enter within the balustrade. And to enter into the temple, the enclosure, whoever is caught will himself be responsible for his ensuing death. We're glad you came. That's Thanks for visiting. This is you ever see the redneck no trespassing signs, like with the shotguns on them and no need to call 911, I'll kill you, that kind of stuff? Yeah. My dad's got a few on his property. This is the first century version of that, is what this is. Like, if you enter, you're gonna die. We'll kill you. That's how serious this is. Yeah, James.
Didn't Luke have to get circumcised because of something like this? Or was it somebody did?
I don't know, I'd have to look into it.
Right?
I don't remember. But pretty serious business. Yeah, serious business. So this is a reality of the temple. It's a reality of the world that they live in. It's a reality of what Paul is writing into. And so it's a religious, socio-cultural, ethnic reality. Anybody who's gone to the temple, familiar with the temple, would know about this. So the question is this the primary thing that Paul's referring to in his mind? When he says that this hostility has been killed in Messiah Jesus on the cross, is this division between Jew and Gentile the primary thing that he's talking about? Well, people debate these things, you know, and it is definitely, I would say, a big part of what Paul's talking about. Now, Paul is a sophisticated thinker, and I think he's so creative. He's often drawing on all kinds of things and ideas, and rarely with Paul is it an either or. Most of the time it's all of the above. It's D on your test. It's all of the above. And so it's this thing that he calls the Torah of commandments and decrees. Like, that is the thing. You with me? Like, this is what he calls out. So welcome to Paul's very complicated view of the Torah, because he has a complicated relationship with Torah. And Torah, that's the word that came to refer to the first 5 books of the Bible you hold in your hand, right? But Paul's pretty clear. He's not just talking about the first 5 books of the Bible. What he's talking about, like the covenantal laws of the covenant. Now, when we think of Torah is a narrative. And it's a narrative telling a story about how the people of Israel were rescued to follow the terms of the covenant. And how from day one, they've been messing it up. I mean, that's what this story tells us, first 5 books of the Bible. They had messed up, they were given the covenant, and from day one, they blew it. So you remember the first 2 commands of the covenant. Have no other gods, have no idols. And what are they doing the next day? It's very intentional. Like, they're serving other gods. Like, the point is, they've been violating the covenant ever since it was handed to them, because they're humans, and this is what humans do. So the whole actual narrative of the Torah isn't trying to tell you, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and follow these laws so that God, the God of Israel, will smile on you. That's not the point. The point of the narrative, the point of Torah, is to expose how humanity has failed when given the covenant. That's the point of Torah. And so it's a story about how God's chosen people are incapable of being God's faithful covenant partners. And so that's Paul's view of Torah. But he has a really nuanced view of these commands, that they're both good and righteous and God's will, and at the same time, so this is where the complexity comes in. They're good, but at the same time, they're also an agent of death and hostility. Isn't that bizarre? Like, God's law is good, is it not? But at the same time, it brought about death and hostility. And it created a dividing wall. Like, how does Paul think about this stuff? And so you can see he's got some deep theology of the Torah, of the commands, that he's not making explicit here in Ephesians chapter 2. Fortunate for us, this is not the only place that he talks about it. It's not the only place that he spells this out. He was compelled to give a much more detailed account of what he's talking about, a much more detailed explanation of what he means here in his letter to the Romans. So open your Bibles to Romans chapter 7. And in Romans chapter 7, he's convinced that what he calls the Torah is something that followers of Jesus, Jew and non-Jew, he says that they have to die to, that we have to die to. So this is part of Paul's phrase, to say when you sign up, when you give your allegiance to the risen Jesus, your old identity has died back there. Look at what he says. So my brothers and sisters, you also died to the law through the body of Christ. It's left behind in the old creation, and now you are a part of the new messianic humanity, the new messianic family. And that new messianic humanity has died in the sense of it's no longer bound to the powers. So it's been released from the powers. And he calls one of those powers Torah. Now, this confused a lot of people in his day, and thankfully we have Romans chapter 7, which is his explanation of it, which still confuses a lot of people to this day, and it confuses me as well. But I think it's at least coherent. It helps give us a grasp, an understanding of what he's talking about. And so look at what he says here. He says, while we were in the flesh, now remember, he's already used this language in Ephesians chapter 2. In the flesh, the sinful passions, he's using the same language here. But while we were in the flesh, we were actually stimulated by the laws of the Torah that were at work in the members of our body to bear fruit from death. So the Torah is actually working in the flesh to produce death. But he says we've been released from the Torah, having died to that which we are bound, because we serve in the newness of the Spirit and not in the old way of the written code. What Paul does not mean is that, what he doesn't mean is that there's Judaism and then there's Christianity. He doesn't mean that Judaism is legalistic, try and make God happy by earning your salvation, and Christianity is grace with no conditions, right? That's not what he means. It's unconditioned grace, unearned grace. There's nothing that made you more or less worthy of it. It's sheer gift is what it is. And so we've kind of polarized Judaism and Christianity in this way. Paul would be so disturbed if that's what we're doing, because the point of Torah was to tell you that what you're doing is not right. The point of Torah was to highlight how you weren't living in accordance with God's law. So the Torah itself is trying to tell you you need a new covenant, and God's people need to be recreated by the Spirit. But those laws are a part of the problem. So look at what he says here. Is the law sinful? No. Certainly not. And he wants to highlight that. He says, you think what I'm saying is that Torah was bad and that Torah is sinful? Certainly not. However, does the law cause hostility and enmity in some way? For sure. So how do you account for that? Well, listen to what he says. Somebody just read these verses for us. Read what I have on the screen.
So my brothers and sisters, you also died to the law through the body of Christ, all of it?
All of it.
Okay. But you might belong to one another, to him who was raised from the dead, in order that we might bear fruit for God. For when we were in the realm of the flesh, the sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in us, so that we bore fruit for death. But now, by dying to what once bound us, we have been released from the law, so that we serve in the new way of the Spirit, and not in the old way of the written code. What shall we say then? Is the law sinful? Certainly not. Nevertheless, I would not have known what sin was had it not been for the law. For I would not have known what coveting really was if the law had not said, you shall not covet.
Okay, so wrap your mind around what he's saying here. He says, listen, the laws of the Torah are an expression of God's will. They help identify sin. They help identify things that are contradictory to the will of God, things that will ruin God's good world and have no part in the new creation. And then he says, he picks out a very specific thing. He says, you shall not covet. Why is he picking covetousness? Why is he picking out this law out of Torah? You shall not covet. You shall not desire. What do you think? What's the fundamental sin of Torah? When you think of the Old Testament, first 5 books of the Bible, what's the fundamental, out of the gate sin?
They want what the other nations have around them.
Say again, Leslie.
They want what the other
Okay, so they don't want God.
And even from the beginning, I mean, Eve wanted what she was told she could not have.
Okay,
It
so
was always-
when you go to Genesis 3, read that, Amanda. You called it.
When the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes, excuse me, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. She gave also to her husband with her, and he ate.
Okay, so the tree was desirable. The Hebrew there is nechmad, and it means she coveted the tree. She saw that it was pleasing to the eyes, and she wanted it. Right, so it's the human desire. It's the age-old, right out of the gate, sin to have my own vision of what is right and what is not right. To define what is right and what is wrong. It's my own knowledge of good and evil. And so, back in Romans chapter 7, he brings up one of the 10 Commandments, and that was the primal violation of the 10 Commandments of, I'm going to go my own way. I'm going to do my own thing. I want what I want, not what you tell me is good for me. I'm going to choose what's good for me. But something crazy happened, like when I was told not to desire what isn't rightly mine. There's this thing like sin, and here sin for sure doesn't mean like a stupid thing you do. Sin has become a power here in Romans chapter 7, the way he's talking about it. Sin taking opportunity through that commandment produced in me a desiring of all kinds. So apart from the Torah, sin is dead. You see how he's talking about this? Like he's saying that desire, without you knowing that it's wrong, is not sin. Sin, apart from Torah, is dead. So Torah is good, but Torah actually made sin, sin. Are you with me? Like, you think Paul has a dense, kind of hard to understand thought process going on here, his relationship with Torah? It's about to get even weirder. And if you've already read ahead, if you already know this text, you know what he's about to say. And so he has this idea that the divine command, paradoxically, both puts a spotlight on what is wrong, but under the conditions of slavery to the powers that actually creates through sin. It actually comes about through sin, and sin creates the very thing that you just became aware of. Does that make sense? It's as if the Torah gets hijacked by the powers. And the problem isn't the Torah, it's that the powers of sin and darkness that work through the Torah, that work through the commands of Torah. He says, I once was alive apart from the Torah. If God hadn't told me what not to do, I would be just fine. But God told me what to do. God gave me his law, and it was good. And I had a choice. But I had my own desires. And so the powers that be, the principalities, those dark forces that we battle against, hijacked God's law and used it to create sin and death in the world. Is this, are you following along with what we're saying? So, the commands of the Torah, which are an invitation to life, end up resulting in death and actually becoming an agent of death. How bizarre is that? Like, God's law, which invited you to a covenantal promise and covenantal relationship, actually became a tool for death, hijacked by the powers. Christy, you want to say something like that?
I do,
Yeah.
because I'm thinking about this, like, how would you explain this to a child?
I wouldn't try to explain this to a child.
Well, I mean, it speaks to the nature of God. You tell a child not to put their hand in the fire, but God gave you the fire to use for good. But if the fire wasn't created, then the kid wouldn't put his hand in the fire.
It's a great thought.
It's kind of the same thing.
Yes.
You know?
It really is, and that's a good illustration. Like, don't play in the fire. The fire is good for light and warmth and cooking, and all these good things. But it can also create death. And it's like, oh, but it's so pretty, I want to touch it. Right? It's desirable. And now that, if I wouldn't have been told that the fire, well, now I'm struggling to explain this. Right?
I mean, it goes back to trust, like, trust that I've given it to you for this reason. Like, I mean, the law is here for this reason. These are he gives the parameters.
Yes.
Don't go outside of these parameters.
Right.
You know, we all, we want to, we do it.
Yeah.
And so so I think it goes back to trust, is it's, that's the beautiful thing about children is oftentimes they do, not always, but, like, I mean, they have a simpler trust than we do.
Yes. Leslie Jo.
Well, not only to trust, but also we need to know we're sinners. We need to know we need a Savior, and the law reveals that. And, I mean, we can think of a lot of parenting analogies to Chris, because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, your children don't know what they're doing wrong until you start training them that way. And then you have a really fun ride as they test every boundary, just like we do. But we have to have this to know that we need a Savior. So,
But the bizarre part to me is they're not wrong. They're not in the wrong until you tell them they're in the wrong. Right? Without the knowledge of being in the wrong, they're not in the wrong. Kelly.
Don't remember the context exactly or the passage, but didn't Jesus say something like that, that if I hadn't come and told them about this, they wouldn't have been held responsible?
Correct.
But
Yeah.
now they've heard it,
Right.
and they're on the hook.
You're no longer without excuse. Right. Yeah, man.
Well, and I don't know if I'm like veering off course here, but I mean, I think, Paul just talks so much about all of this, and it's so, to me, sometimes it's just like mentally exhausting. But I think,
Welcome to my week.
but I think, what he's, I mean, there were people, and Paul was one of them, who worshipped the law every bit as much as they worshipped God. I mean, the law was their
Correct.
security, and what he's saying is, all of these people who didn't, like, he's like, the law is good, it still has a purpose, but keep it in its rightful place. It's not what we, ascribe to in worship, and, it's what we still today learn from it.
Yes.
But it is not, and, all of these people that didn't have the law, and all of this enmity or whatever, between these people, there was a pride there, like, we are the people of the law, and he's
Right.
saying, no, you're the people of Jesus.
Yeah, so in Paul's mind, I mean, basically to summarize the story going through his mind, God chooses the family, redeems them from slavery, gives them commands, like freed them from the Israelites, gives them commands. They systematically violate them all, every one of them, and it leads them to death in the wilderness and a lifetime, right? But he wants to make sure that we're all on the same page. Is the problem the Torah? No. He's going to say it again. The problem is sin taking an opportunity through Torah. Sin taking an opportunity through the commandment. He says, it deceived me. And so he's got a story on his mind here. Kelly?
One of the major things in Paul's ministry was fighting against what we used to call the Judaizing teachers.
Uh-huh.
They were trying to get people who had become Christians to take on all the aspects of the law.
Correct.
Again, that's what he was showing was unnecessary. And he said, you can fulfill all the commandments that need to be fulfilled if you will love your neighbor as yourself and go at it from that way. You're not going to hurt anybody. You're not going to be doing the non-ethical part of the law. All this other stuff, the touch not, taste not, feel not, it doesn't allow you to not sin. It doesn't allow you to do what God really wants you to do. And that's what they were trying to pull the people back into, or put them into that they'd never been into, that Peter said, neither we nor the people before us could bear it.
Right.
We couldn't do it.
Right.
So, talk about enmity and division. You can get away from that. You can simplify that.
Yeah, he's trying to help them see, us see, that the law was given to show you the human you were created to be. And it's not about a checklist. It's not about obey 613 commands. It's about who you were created to be. But it became a problem. And so and we'll pick this up next week. And hopefully it'll be more clear. You think about the beginning story, Genesis 3, the serpent deceiving Adam and Eve. What Paul's doing is trying to shake the snake out of the bush. He's exposing everything. Oh, what he's saying is, through the cross of Christ, everything is brought into the light. Even the ways in which good things were used by the powers. And not only did Christ bring you into a covenantal family, like this is just a part of the mystery. Christ crushed the head of the serpent. And all the ways in which he used even the good things of God to bring about. And then he's going to get into this language, and we'll talk about this next week. It's fascinating. You know, he's like, man, I do the things I don't want to do. I don't do the things I do want to do that I know is right, but it's no longer me who sins. It's at work. It's my flesh that's sinning, not me. So prepare to talk about that, okay? And come with your eye-opening, revealing thoughts on that text, because I'll wrestle with it all week. All right, thanks. See ya.
Yeah.